Have you ever had one of those days, or, maybe, let's be honest, one of those years where you catch yourself just staring out the window and thinking, is this actually it?
Oh, yeah. That is a very familiar feeling.
Right. Like you wake up, you commute, you work your absolute hardest just to pay the bills, buy the groceries, and try to afford a decent place to live. You go to sleep, the alarm rings, and you just do it all over again.
It's exhausting. You get this sinking feeling that you're spending your entire life just grinding to maintain a basic baseline of survival.
Exactly. It is an incredibly common feeling, that overwhelming exhaustion of the daily grind. But what if the way out of that trap wasn't a promotion, or winning the lottery, or, I don't know, moving completely off the grid?
Which honestly sounds pretty tempting sometimes.
It does, but it's not super practical. So today we are going into a really fascinating 2024 translated essay. It's by an author named Sufeng, and it is titled, Being Free from Material Constraints, You Become a Celestial Being.
Which is quite the title.
It really is. And our mission for this deep dive is to explore a truly radical perspective on how to escape that relentless exhaustion without actually having to throw away all of your earthly possessions.
Yeah, and I know that title, Becoming a Celestial Being, might immediately sound to you like we're about to ask you to shave your head. Like, put on a robe and go meditate on a mountain peak for the next decade.
Yeah, that's exactly where my mind went first.
Right. So I want to validate any skepticism you might be feeling right now. But the actual text we're looking at provides a surprisingly grounded, highly psychological framework. It's less about mysticism and much more about fundamentally redefining our relationship with our own consciousness and, well, just the stuff we interact with every single day.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the core thesis of this text hits really hard right out of the gate.
It definitely doesn't pull any punches.
No, it doesn't. The author argues that eating, clothing, shelter, transportation, and even the natural biological processes of birth, aging, illness, and death, these are all manifestations of what he calls material constraints.
Right. And he writes that most of us are so dominated by these concerns, so busy worrying about what to eat and where to live, that we completely overlook the true purpose of coming into this world.
Which is a huge claim.
It is. The text suggests we spend our entire existence toiling and laboring for the material, and that this obsession becomes a cognitive trap. And here is the crucial pivot the author makes, and it's where the philosophy becomes incredibly applicable.
Okay, how so?
Well, we have to look at the mechanics of this trap. The vital distinction the text makes is that the material constraints do not mean the physical possessions themselves are what bind us.
Oh, so the physical things aren't the problem.
Exactly. The sandwich isn't the trap. The apartment isn't the trap.
Which is a relief, honestly. Because if we need food and shelter to physically survive, how could we possibly be free of them? Like, if I don't pay my rent, I am out on the street. If I don't eat, I starve.
Right, biological reality is real, but the trap is formed when our consciousness is entirely dominated by materialism. It's when the mind is consumed by the acquisition of things.
Okay, I see.
Because we have physical bodies, we absolutely need to eat. The text acknowledges this without hesitation. However, eating is not the purpose of life.
Right.
If you spend your entire day thinking about what you're going to eat, meticulously planning it and working solely to obtain a highly specific, luxurious type of food, then your consciousness is bound by food.
I'm picturing this like an orbit in space. The text explicitly says, whatever we revolve around, we are bound by.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, think about gravity. If you are a planet orbiting a sun, you are trapped by that sun's gravitational pull. You can't just float away into the galaxy. Your entire path is dictated by that massive object in the center.
Exactly.
So the author isn't telling you to stop eating or to burn all your cash. They are telling you to stop letting food, money, and status be the blazing sun at the absolute center of your solar system.
Right, because if you do, their gravity will dictate your every single move.
You'll just run in endless circles around them until you burn out.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is how the text explicitly states that freeing oneself does not mean giving up houses, cars, medicines, or tools. I really want to emphasize that for you because it's the most common misunderstanding of ascetic philosophies.
Like you have to become a monk and give away everything you own.
Exactly. You don't have to reject the material world. It simply means that your thoughts, your intentions, your words, and your actions no longer revolve around the endless acquisition of more material possessions.
They don't control you anymore.
Right. Instead, your consciousness revolves around something more enduring. You break the gravitational pull of the material, even while still utilizing material things to live.
Okay, but if I stop caring about accumulating money and status, my mind is going to feel entirely empty. Like, what fills that void? Where does a person's focus actually go if it's no longer on upgrading their apartment?
Well, the author maps this out by dividing existence into four specific realms, and these correspond directly to where a person's consciousness is anchored.
Okay, walk me through those.
At the base level, there is the material world. This is where the vast majority of people reside, their minds entirely occupied by survival, accumulation, and social status.
Got it. So that's the baseline.
Yeah. Moving up from there, we find the spiritual world, which is inhabited by what the text calls celestial beings.
Let me pause you there because celestial being definitely sounds like someone floating on a cloud playing a harp.
It does. It sounds very mythical. But the author uses these terms metaphorically to describe states of psychological liberation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, a celestial being in this context is simply someone whose mind is occupied by creation, beauty, or discovery rather than ownership.
That makes a lot more sense.
Above that is the world of the soul, inhabited by super-celestial beings and Buddhas. In the text framework, this represents a deeper level of detachment, a state of pure being and enlightenment where the ego is entirely dissolved.
And there's one more above that, right?
Yes. Finally, at the absolute peak is the holographic world, inhabited by gods and the greatest creator.
Okay, that sounds like a massive conceptual leap. What does a holographic world even mean in a practical sense?
Well, in the context of this kind of philosophical framework, a holographic paradigm usually implies that every individual part contains the entirety of the whole.
Right.
So, at that ultimate level of consciousness, you aren't just an individual observing the universe, you recognize that you are the universe. The greatest creator here functions as the author's vision of a non-denominational ultimate source of all energy and matter. It's the theoretical endpoint of complete unity.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because while those upper realms sound deeply theoretical, the text grounds the first major jump from the material world to the spiritual world in very practical reality.
Yes, it absolutely does.
To become a celestial being in this specific framework doesn't mean you suddenly unlock magic powers. It means you are living in the spiritual world simply by virtue of no longer toiling for the sake of accumulating more and better material resources. It's a shift in mindset, not biology.
That is the defining threshold. The text argues that life is bound by what confines it, and life exists in that world. If you possess nothing in your mind, meaning you don't cling to ownership as your identity, you enter the spiritual world.
And the author gives some real-world examples of this, right?
Yeah, the author provides very tangible, real-world examples of people who already inhabit the spiritual world right now. Consider artists who get completely lost in their artistic creations, or scientists who are incredibly deep in their scientific explorations.
When a scientist is in that flow state in the lab, or, a painter is halfway through a canvas, they aren't thinking about their credit score or what kind of car their neighbor drives.
No, not at all.
Their consciousness is operating on a completely different frequency. They are orbiting the discovery or the creation itself.
The text also mentions monks and monasteries, and specifically a group referred to as the Chanyuan celestials of the second home.
And the second home is the author's term for a specific model of cooperative, low-ego living.
Right. What unites all these groups is that they still create material wealth. The scientist might invent something highly profitable, or the artist might paint a masterpiece that sells for millions.
But that creation of wealth is purely a natural behavior. It's an adjunct to their life, a byproduct of their passion or their spiritual focus. It is never the end goal.
Precisely.
I'm stuck on that phrase, natural behavior. Think of an apple tree growing apples. The tree isn't stressed out trying to grow apples to impress the other trees.
No, it's not comparing its apples to the tree next door.
Exactly. It isn't trying to build up a massive apple savings account. It just grows them because that's the natural expression of its existence.
Yeah.
But playing devil's advocate here for you, the listener, you might be saying, sure, the apple tree is very zen and the artist is passionate. But isn't it still significantly nicer to cry in a luxury villa than to cry in a thatched hut?
That is such a common response.
Physical comfort is a real biological baseline, right?
It is, and the author anticipates exactly this pushback and uses that exact analogy, the villa versus the thatched hut.
Oh, really?
Yes, the text readily acknowledges physical realities. Living in a villa is, objectively, physically more comfortable than living in an attic. Driving a luxury car is a smoother ride than driving a tractor.
Right. A tractor is a bumpy ride no matter how enlightened your consciousness is.
The philosophy isn't trying to gaslight you into pretending a hard wooden floor is softer than a memory foam mattress.
So what is the argument then?
The core argument is about the source of our deepest suffering. The true pain of living in a thatched hut, according to the text, doesn't actually come from the physical hut itself.
Where does it come from?
The real misery doesn't stem from the draft coming through the walls. It comes from the societal gaze.
The societal gaze.
Yeah.
Like how other people see you.
Exactly. In the material world, a person living in a thatched hut feels acute pain and anxiety because society's common values admire the person in the villa and actively look down upon the person in the hut.
Oh, wow. And that judgment becomes internalized. It makes the person in the hut feel inadequate, which ripples out into every part of their life.
Yes. It might make it harder for them to find a spouse, harder to raise a family, harder to be respected in their community.
Their worries are heavily constructed by the social friction of their material standing.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, think about how much of your own daily stress isn't about physical survival at all. It's about social comparison.
Oh, totally. It's the pressure to maintain a certain lifestyle so you aren't left behind by your peers.
Yeah, the anxiety isn't about freezing to death. It's about not being able to afford the vacation everyone else is taking or wearing the wrong clothes to a meeting.
So a person whose consciousness has shifted into the spiritual world feels zero worry or sorrow in that exact same thatched hut.
Because they aren't orbiting the sun of societal judgment anymore?
They don't care that society looks down on the hut because society's gaze is no longer the metric for their self-worth. They are perfectly content reading a book or pursuing their art.
The physical discomfort is just a minor detail, not a reflection of their value as a human being. It completely neutralizes the sting of poverty.
Okay, let's transition from the abstract philosophy into some hard modern-day math, because the text actually provides a case study to prove this exact point.
It does, and it's a very compelling one. The author gives a real-world example of the Canadian headquarters of Lifechanyuan, which operates as one of these second home communities.
And in the year 2023, there were 5 people living there, referred to as the Crown of Chanyuan Celestials, right?
Correct. The text states that their total combined income for the entire year was 100,000 Canadian dollars.
Okay, let's look at that. To give you the baseline, the text points out that the average annual income for a single person in Canada is over $43,000.
So this community of 5 is operating on a radically smaller financial footprint, just 20,000 each.
Right, but the real friction comes when you look at where they live. The text uses Vancouver as the benchmark, a city notorious for its astronomical real estate prices.
It's incredibly expensive. The author notes that the monthly rent for a standard one-bedroom apartment in Vancouver is no less than 1,600 Canadian dollars.
Wait, let me do the mental math on that real quick.
Yeah.
If their income breaks down to roughly $1,660 a month and rent is $1,600, that leaves about 60 Canadian dollars for the entire month.
Yeah, when you run the numbers on an individual earning roughly $20,000 a year in a city with that rent baseline, the math simply does not work out for independent living.
Not at all.
After housing, an individual would be left with a microscopic fraction of their income for groceries, electricity, internet, transportation, and everything else.
How is that physically possible? I mean, in the material world, with a material mindset, having $60 for 30 days of groceries and bills is a full-blown crisis. That's panic-inducing.
This raises an important question. How do they not just survive, but according to the text, live very comfortably and freely?
Yeah.
The author asks the reader directly, are they Canadians earning over $40,000 a year, stressing about independent bills, living comfortably? Or are these 5 individuals living more freely?
And the secret to their high quality of life on such a mathematically impossible budget is extreme communal cooperation.
Exactly. So the mechanics of that second home model kick in here. They aren't trying to rent 5 separate apartments and pay 5 separate internet bills.
Right. By abandoning the individualistic, competitive scramble for personal wealth, that whole mindset of, I need my own apartment, my own car, my own appliances, they unlock massive economies of scale.
Precisely. When your consciousness is no longer bound by the ego's need to possess things exclusively, you can share effortlessly. 5 people pooling $100,000 live in a shared, cohesive environment.
They buy groceries in bulk for one kitchen, they share transportation, they split utilities.
The friction of ego is completely removed. They don't need a separate lawnmower for every person just to prove they each own a lawnmower.
Yeah, by pooling resources, that $100,000 goes incredibly far. They actually achieve material abundance by letting go of the need for individual material identity.
The material wealth they experience is richer because they aren't wasting energy and resources trying to maintain separate status-driven silos.
This is the practical manifestation of entering the spiritual world.
Yes. The lack of individual ownership isn't felt as a deprivation. It's experienced as freedom from the crushing overhead of the material game.
So what does this all mean? If we zoom out and look at the whole journey this text has taken us on, the author is essentially arguing that the ultimate life hack isn't getting a higher salary or a better title.
Yeah, it's much deeper than that.
The ultimate life hack is detaching your self-worth and your consciousness from the endless pursuit of material accumulation. It's realizing that the exhaustion you feel every single day isn't just a byproduct of biological survival.
It's a byproduct of a socially constructed game that you actually have the power to opt out of. The author distills this entire philosophy into one final, highly paradoxical principle at the very end of the text. They write, "Unselfishness leads to self, and selflessness leads to fulfillment."
Unselfishness leads to self. That is really powerful.
By desperately grasping for material goods to secure your own survival and elevate your status, you actually lose your true self to anxiety and exhaustion.
You become a slave to it.
Right. The more you try to protect your individual piece of the pie, the smaller your world becomes. But by letting go of that desperate grasp, by becoming selfless and shifting your focus toward cooperation and higher pursuits, you ironically unlock a significantly more comfortable and infinitely more fulfilling life.
It is a complete inversion of how we are taught to operate. I mean, we're told from day one that if you don't fight tooth and nail to secure your individual fortress, you'll be left with nothing.
But this text is arguing that the fighting itself is what leaves you empty.
Which leaves me with a final thought I want to pass on to you, just a thought experiment to mull over as you go about your day.
Let's hear it.
If the author is right, and the anxiety of the thatched hut is purely created by societal expectations, what would happen to our global economy tomorrow if everyone woke up as a celestial being?
Oh, wow. That would change everything.
Right. If all 8 billion of us suddenly stopped orbiting material wealth, and we only worked and created out of pure natural behavior rather than a desire for status or excess, would our modern systems completely collapse? Or would we finally build a society where absolutely no one is stressed about paying rent?
It's definitely a provocative question.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take a moment today to look around and ask yourself, what is the massive sun sitting at the center of your solar system? And is it finally time to change your orbit?